Thanks for coming. I'm Ron Reale. I'm another member of the PMA, which is a terrific organization. We, for purposes of education alone, it is worth whatever your particular price of admission is, whether you're a composer, small, medium, or large, catalog, library. Tonight, I am thrilled, and I've got to chat with these guys over the last few days. It's a really unusually strong, eclectic panel, the kinds of folks that we rarely get together at the same time. We do a whole group of Eric Vasquez is head of creative VP of A&R at Sing Stories, which is a hybrid music group servicing TV and other media, and commercial recording artists. They have had many artist placements, high-profile brands, Vice Media, Microsoft, Netflix, Red Bull. And prior to that, I learned last couple weeks ago that Eric toured with the punk band Dr. No, and that led him right up to the point, got him out of his teens, I guess, and he started his career in writing, production, publishing, and artist management. Next to him is Patrick Wimberly, producer, songwriter, and member of the Brooklyn synth pop duo Chairlift. I know everyone here will know their song Bruises from the handstand song from the Apple ad of 2008-ish. Apart from Chairlift, he's been working with Beyonce, GMT, Solange, and more. Next to Patrick is Dave Nadiuk, music supervisor at Music Supervision Central and the Song Hunters. He recently co-authored the new book, Music Supervision, the complete guide selecting music for movies, TV, games, and new media. Got to start at ABC, went to Fox News and Viacom, one of the founding members of Earshot. Basically, David had the career, one of those careers that I wish I had had, and he is having, and I'm delighted that he is here. And to his right is Eric Kay, partner of the New York Executive Creative Director at the Music Playground and the Diner, which we will discuss shortly. He's been directly involved in the sale or license of over 5,000 pieces of music for use in TV, film, and advertising. As a musician, he's also performed with or produced with the likes of Luther Vandross and Carrie Underwood. These are our guys for tonight. So, one of the things I think will be interesting about this collection is we have a couple of people who have businesses, catalogs, A&R departments, businesses different from the normal production music association libraries, where we're used to having relationships with networks, creating music with a stable of composers that then gets placed. They're coming from a more artistic place, and we run into this with my own small catalog and my team, where we will get requests for, we need stuff that sounds like the radio. Producers want that stuff. They can't afford it. They can't afford what they want, and so they come to folks like us. And then we often don't really quite have what they want, but the folks that do have that are here. And if they don't have that, they're in part of the process that makes that happen. So why don't we start with Eric? Just would you give like the 30 or 40 second rundown of transition from Dr. No to creating tracks, or Jason for media in LA? We have a
tap it.
Good. Oh.
So the transition from Dr. No
to well, 411 and then Sing Stories, but basically the impulse to do what you're doing now, those seeds were planted
right
10 years ago.
Well, after Dr. No, it was very apparent that I needed a job, so didn't think about that. But when I left Dr. No, everybody thought that I was crazy because I was on tour, extensive tours with like Bad Religion and No Effects and Bad Brains. Your hat off is awesome. But when I left Dr. No, it's because I had a bigger vision for where I wanted my music career to be. I didn't want to be pigeonholed in punk rock for the rest of my life. It definitely runs through my blood, and it's something that I hold very close to my heart. But back to when I was 12 years old, my first concert was Nirvana, and it was just about a few months before Kurt Cobain passed away. Before that, I was, into, Slayer and, Sepultura and other hard bands like that. But after I saw Nirvana, I knew that that's where I wanted to be. And so, I started with Dr. No, or started in the backyard punk scene in East LA, and then moved my way up to Dr. No, and headlined, throughout the country with a lot of other big bands. And so, once I left Dr. No, I still had that vision that came to me when I saw Nirvana, and I wanted to do something a little bit more on the mainstream front, and I also wanted to reach a wider audience. So, through transitioning from Dr. No to music licensing or writing for TV and film, I was in IT working for Boeing just to kind of pay the bills. But then after doing some research, then I kind of realized that it was possible that I can make a living through TV and film, because starting a band and playing shows and trying to make a living that way is very difficult. So I put a reel together. I'm a multi-instrumentalist, and I got in the studio, wrote, recorded, mixed, engineered everything myself, and then I sent that over to just a few companies, one of them being 5 Alarm Music, who I'm partners with now, and they picked me up right away, and I started writing from them instantly. And based off of that success and the licenses that were coming in, I was able to form my first music licensing company based on one philosophy, which was artist first, high quality music, authenticity, because those were all the elements that I used naturally for my music reel, and it's why I was successful in that area. So that's the story.
Well, the impetus for you creating, it was more about band tracks and live stuff rather than what you'd heard written for media up to that point. I mean, you come off the road and say, I'm going to create X kinds of tracks because I don't hear it out there.
Well, I had a desire to get into TV and film, and I just thought, wow, how cool would it be for my music to be, on TV, or, go to a movie theater and hear my tracks. So it kind of started with that, but also, I knew that you could make a living off of it, and it wasn't so dependent on the consumer, especially in an age where people are pirating music. So I saw the instant revenue, and so that's why I went for it. But again, what I was doing was just natural. It was natural to me, and through 5 Alarm Music and working with them and starting to hook up with different clients and writing for music supervisors directly, it became very apparent that there was this void in the marketplace for real music, which is just kind of crazy to me. But I learned that the marketplace was very saturated with watered down content, and everybody was operating on this idea that I should have 200, 300,000 tracks in my library without really thinking about the quality aspect of it. So I took advantage of the situation, and I said, well, I'm going to build a company that is going to be the complete opposite of what everybody else is kind of doing. And not everybody else, but when you have so many libraries out there, I think it's hard for clients to really distinguish, hearing the word library, because it has its own stigma, and it's like they hear library and they're like, oh, it's going to be a bunch of watered down tracks. But in actuality, not every company is like that, but I think there's a lot of noise out there, and I think it's also made it very confusing for the end user or the client to distinguish, high quality library to just the bad word library. So.
Right. When you mentioned to me the other day the whole concept of quantity first, which was, we've run up against that. We're 6,000 tracks. Somebody on the phone will say, well, look, I can get X company here. They've got 450,000 tracks. You've got 6,000. Why do I want that? we understand the reason is that we've spent a lot of time on each of those tracks, and hopefully the quality level is very high, but.
And you're gonna, you can have 100,000 tracks in your library, but what use is it if, only 5,000 of them are usable?
Right. So, great. So let me just skip for a moment way down to Eric K, because it's New York-based Music Playground and the Diner. And would you just mention a little bit about the very beginning of it, where you told me about your briefs and how that worked out?
Absolutely. We started off 13 years ago this week as The Lodge, which is an original music company for advertising. And we would do about 300 or 400 original pieces of music. And after a few years of that, Mercedes would call us and we'd send them 10 pieces of music and they would buy one and we'd have 9 left over. And then next week we'd have 90 left over and then 900. And we were sitting on about 5,000 pieces of music that we had written doing nothing. And we chose the best 2,000 in various fields and launched the Diner 10, 11 years ago. The goal being to, if you wanted original music, great. If you didn't have the budget for that, we've got a library too. And what started happening is our same clients said, yeah, but we want a cool band, we want a cool artist, that's way better. So we launched a new division, the Music Playground, and we had people go out and find really, really cool bands or partnerships with indie labels that were not being, synced to their potential. And now we have about 200 artists that we also place for film, TV, and advertising. So we go at it through the three-headed monster. If you want original music, we've got the original division with composers on staff. We've got our library, which is now grown to 25,000 tracks, so not too big, not too small. And then a few thousand tracks by artists. The real interesting thing is there's a lot of crossover between the three catalogs. We've got the same guys that are, putting out records and touring that are writing for the library and still writing original music for creative briefs. So it's sort of an artificial distinction that the general end user, likes to see, even though it's the same guys writing music for all three things a lot of times.
They may not be aware of that fact. They just know that the proof is what they hear. That's when they're going to choose.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a cool factor in getting a band that has 1 million, Instagram followers. That's what they're looking for in addition to the music sometimes. They want that cachet, even though you can get the exact same music with the same singer even for $500, suddenly they have 50,000 if there's a band behind it.
You're finding that's becoming more important for the client?
I wouldn't say it's more important, but it's something they're very aware of.
Yeah.
That they're buying the audience and the cool factor associated with the artist.
Right.
More so in advertising, well, both in film and TV also. A lot of TV shows are very hip to what music they're placing in their show, and library won't cut it.
But also you're grabbing an audience.
Right.
It's just
Right. Right. And you, Eric Vasquez, you're finding the same thing on the West Coast? You're talking about we would really like somebody with a social media presence.
Yes, but more so just good music. I've been hearing it for years, and every time I would meet with a client, whether it's like NBC or a reality production company, they'd be so relieved to talk to me and to connect with a company who's thinking a little bit, differently in terms of, the watered down content and an artist. And so, yeah, I mean, I've been seeing this kind of this shift for a while now, and I think even today it's even more prominent.
Right. Eric Cave, so in terms of continuing to feed the beast, as it were, getting new albums, new tracks, are you finding that you maintain a sort of steady flow over the years that is either increased or decreased, or is it roughly, how many albums you've got to do a year?
Yeah, on the library side, we're not adding 10,000 tracks a year. We're adding enough to keep it fresh and to keep it on everybody's nose. On the artist side, you're constantly looking for new bands because most bands' careers aren't more than 3 to 5 years. So you know, what's really cool this year is going to sound really dated in 3 years on the artist side.
Right.
So you're constantly having to be out there finding new artists. And what we're asked for is different every year. You know, one year everybody wants Coldplay, the next year it's Phoenix. So, you know, you're constantly looking for original bands, which they will be asking for next year.
And we talked a moment ago about sub-publishers. I'm sure most of the people in the room are aware of your sub-publishers overseas take care of placing your music in their territory. Do you find that you get into issues with, say, the artist end of things, that it's more complex to do that business overseas, or is it pretty much the same deal that you have domestically?
For me, it's pretty much the same deal. I mean, the artists are happy to get placements.
Right.
They're not going to hold anything up because they have a German sub-publisher,
Right.
nor is the German sub-publisher.
Yeah, right.
It's more of knowing the intricacies of each country and how to price it properly. Like Italy, for example, pays no royalties on advertising, similar to Canada.
Right.
So that's going to be priced different from Germany, which, you know, pays really nice on the back end.
Right.
And I just wanted to add that with our sub-publishers, right now we're in about 19 countries and still adding to that, but there's a shift in their marketplace as well. And I've been hearing it for the last several months. More and more music licensing companies throughout Europe who are also now trying to fill that void as well when it comes to artist-driven content. So, I mean, I've been approached, for a while now, and they're just, you know, they want to get us in. You know, they want Sync Stories in because now their clients are now aware of, this kind of this both sides that, you know, everybody's trying to figure out. So, I just want to throw it out there that it's happening throughout Europe now too.
Right. Good. So I'm going to shift gears and come back to Patrick for a second, because Patrick came at this from a very different vantage point than the two of you.
Hey, Rob.
Hey, Patrick. So, 2008. Just share with folks in the room about playing out in Silver Lake and leading to that placement.
So I play in a band called Chairlift, actually, and we just did our last tour a couple of weeks ago, so I'm not playing with them anymore. But our career was kind of jump-started, not kind of, it was definitely jump-started by a placement we had in 2008 in a Apple iPod commercial. Back when like the iPod commercial was like the best thing you could possibly do for your career. And we hadn't even released an album yet. But the story about how we got it is actually really good, because it's just like, it's a good old-fashioned story about, for artists, like you go out there and you tour and you work your butts off and you borrow your mom's van that doesn't have air conditioning and you drive it across the country and like you book as many gigs as you can possibly find. So our first tour we did, it was a 4-week tour around the country, leaving from New York. This was 2007. And we had, I think, 10 shows. So that's like 30 days. So it's like we play a show and then drive for 3 days. We get to LA, we're opening up for our friend's band at the Silver Lake Lounge, and there's about 3 people in the audience. One of them is just is this super wasted girl, very drunk. And she comes up to the merch booth afterwards and she buys like our demo CD that we had been burning in the backseat of the van on our trips. But it turns out she was the girlfriend of an influential radio host in LA, a guy named Nick Harcourt, who hosted it, and Morning Becomes Eclectic. So we sold 1 CD that night, and the next week we heard our song on KCRW, which was I don't know if it still is, but at the time it was a lot of music supervisors were listening to it because he was finding lots of new talent. That's the very, very beginning of the story, which I didn't know that part of the story was relevant until probably 5 or 6 years later, when I actually met the people that put our song in an iPod commercial. But all right, so a year later, from 2007, when we're doing this tour, we're traveling through LA again, and we get a note from our record label, K9 Records, and they're like, "Hey, somebody from Apple wants to come to the show." It wasn't actually somebody from Apple. I forget which company did the Apple commercials, but and we never met this person, and they came to the show. We went to the door afterwards to check the guest list, because we had put them on the guest list, just to see if their names were crossed off, because they didn't come talk to us or anything. And their names were indeed crossed off. And then about a week later, we got a contract emailed to us from our lawyer from Apple saying, "You don't have this iPod commercial, but if you did have it, would you agree to these terms?" And we said we were advised to say yes, which I don't regret. And then they still never told us we had it. And then Steve Jobs held a press conference where he announced the new iPod Chromatics, iPod Nano, whatever it was. And he played our song at the press conference, and that's when we found out we were in an iPod commercial.
And then a lot changed at that point.
And then the commercial aired the next Saturday, right before Saturday Night Live, and then it was global and worldwide the next week. And then we had to figure out how to finish our record so that we could put it out. So we finished the record the next week, and then we were on a world tour for like the next year and a half or something, playing catch up.
Fascinating, because it's the opposite of how it would have happened decades ago, where a band has a hit or several hits, and then many years later, somebody's going to decide we're going to use that in our placements, or we're going to use that for this ad or that ad. The exact opposite. And had a staggering effect on your careers at the time.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, yeah. So, and, okay. Yeah.
I just have to say, I'm a retired artist manager, but I've been a music supervisor for my whole life, almost 2 decades now. We'll talk about that later, but I just want to respond directly to what you're saying. I mean, the reason that I got into artist management was because I knew that was possible.
Yeah.
And that's what I told the artists and the bands that I worked with. Like, this opportunity exists, and I said, the Apple iPod commercial is the holy grail.
Yeah.
We're not going to get that, but we're going to get dozens of things like that.
Yeah.
And that's what's going to separate my management versus whoever else you're considering working with. And I put together a nice roster. And one of my bands at that time, Blessed Nation, rap trio from Brooklyn, New York, and New Jersey, Union City, New Jersey. We got a placement in Blue Crush. If you guys remember Blue Crush, it was a New Line Cinema film about surfing. And it was a remix of Bananarama's song Cruel Summer. You may have heard it. And that jump-started their career. But unfortunately, they flopped too. They would tell you themselves, but it was more of an implosion than anything else.
You said they flopped too. We never flop.
In your story, I'll tell mine.
That's not what he meant.
I just want to make sure we get all points addressed here, because I think what happened to you is very relevant, and I think it has a lot to do with what the people in this room are trying to accomplish in a lot of ways.
But also extremely rare. I mean, you can put together a roster of some great artists, but still, the chances, it's very tough to get this kind of placement even with like a couple of dozen terrific acts or albums or whatever. I mean, there's so many people creating music, which is one of the great things about this point in time. Music has never been more accessible. There's never been more written. There's never been, I can say, sold, streamed than where we are in history of the industry.
Well, and the amount of exposure that the average composer has today versus 10 years ago is immeasurable.
Right.
Everyone has credibility if you have an idea of how to get yourself heard. And it's not that hard.
Right. Which, yes, I'm just going to bring them there. I wanted to do, just follow up with Patrick one more time on, we were, Kari and I, one of my colleagues and I were out in, we had meetings at ABC a couple of years ago, and we were in they had like this room where bands would do, were amps in there and a piano and a Rhodes and stuff, and I said to somebody, what's this for? Oh, we have, like, artists will come and play, and we'll decide if we're going to play or something. I thought, I didn't know that sort of thing existed. And then fast forward to our conversation about you guys actually playing there.
Yeah. So after, it was about like halfway through the record cycle of our first record, we got signed to Columbia Records, which was a good thing. We love Columbia, and they've been good to us. But there's some things that they would get us to do. Anytime we finished a record, they would plan these trips to LA, where we would be sort of shuffled around to all the big studios and networks, and we'd meet all the music supervisors. And sometimes we'd play a couple songs in these rooms. It would be, I imagine, Warner Music would, and it would be very similar to this room. Actually, this might be one of the rooms. But you'd play and you'd meet these music supervisors, and you'd make these connections, and they'd be like, oh yeah, I really love your music. This new record is great. And it's like it'll totally work in this show and that show, and I'm working on this thing. This is all great. And we did that a couple of times, but as I told you, nothing ever really came of it. And then on our last record, we decided not to do that.
Well, often the people who make that ultimate decision may not even be present.
Yeah, and that's what I thought this was my assessment of the situation, and all of the different people and different publishers that we had worked with and had promised us the world, and it always seemed like that music supervisor or that person was never high enough up in the chain to actually make the decision. So you're playing your music or playing a song for these people that they're music fans and they're music lovers, and they get it, and you make this connection with them, and they're like, oh yes, I get this. This is perfect. You're making just the right music for this thing that I'm working on. And then it doesn't actually materialize into a placement. And my assessment was that, like, the people that actually make the final decision, they're not the music supervisors. They're actually, it's the executive producer feels like the song just isn't quite right, and they'll throw out some ridiculous term like, this is not, could it be more like watery or like spatial or like fluorescent? I'm just like, yeah, maybe. I don't know. I don't have that plug-in. Like, so I don't. I mean, that's my assessment, is that there's just always somebody that maybe doesn't really understand music like the people that we're working with every day closely actually making the decision.
Right. So, Dave, to tie in what we've been discussing, and I know that your experiences over the course of time would lead you to be an asset for anybody to talk about any number of things beyond music supervision. But in light of what both Eric and Patrick have talked about as far as coming from a place, and you guys are all musicians, coming from a place of being a musician, and then what you're hearing about placing new, higher quality, mostly live, lyric content driven tracks. What's the best way from your perspective to get music artists to someone like Eric or any of the folks in this room who need to place that material because they have the clients for that?
Right. Well, I'd first like to just finish by commenting on your story. I mean, that's a very disenchanting experience. It's very emotional too, because this gentleman, I hope that all of you understand, did not create his artwork with the intention of getting it licensed in media. So it's a very personal experience for you as an artist. And I think that gets lost in translation and consideration and understanding with so many people in our business. And I think if any of you want to have an artist leg of your company, you have to understand that first and foremost, that a lot of the people that you may have the privilege of working with didn't create their music to be licensed in media originally. They had a far different idea, and they're just learning the business. So we all need to be sympathetic to that. Unfortunately, in your position, you were being showcased.
Showcase, that's what they call it.
Yeah. It's a very common thing. And a lot of the people that were there, you're right, were not the decision makers. And a lot of those people were probably hoping for the opportunity to even be able to say, I like this song.
Yeah.
But most of the meetings those people were in, they probably felt more strangled than you ever felt in your life. Like they never had a voice. They probably had to leave the company 3 times before they even had an opinion, and by the time they got to the company they actually had an opinion, you were somewhere else and they had no access to you. So it's unfortunate. But it doesn't mean that there's not opportunity out there for you and for people like you, and it all comes down to the type of rights and ownership that you have over your catalog and your songs. And sometimes with bands, like we talked about, it doesn't exist. I mean, I know many bands that I would love as a music supervisor, like from a very competitive, personal place, to be the guy that broke that song, just like you said. Like, I want to be the guy. I grew up in a mom and pop music shop in central New Jersey. I know about all levels of musicians. The reason why I became a music supervisor is because I wanted to help musicians break their careers and educate them and show them that you can have a career, that you don't have to be in the basement, you don't have to be in the shitty suburbs, dangerous neighborhood that you live in. You could have a career. And this is before the internet happened. But anyway, to get back to it, how do you build? Are you asking me how do you build your artist-driven catalog?
Yeah, or taking into consideration what we've just been hearing about, because a lot of the folks here, I mean, I'm assuming there are a lot of people with catalogs here. Some of you I know, libraries, and you may have come tonight thinking about, well, we've been getting requests lately for more band type stuff, live stuff, artist stuff, lyric driven stuff. And so how do we compete with places that have been doing that? And there are all levels of that even within the production music community where people will say, we're going to commission an album, a love album, let's say.
Yeah.
But that's going to be, and it's something else I want to talk about, how
But that's
artists
preconceived.
respond.
It's like,
Yes.
it's a plan, it's a strategy to create something that you believe you can sell.
Well, let's take your idea then. Let's say that you've been brought on to advise someone about how to create that arm of their business, how they've got whatever resources they've got, and they want to have more live stuff, not just everything that their composers have been doing. Let's say a lot of it's in the box, maybe some of it's live, but now they're moving into a place where they want radio type stuff.
Sure.
Advise them.
Well, first of all, I think we should talk about what radio type stuff is.
Okay.
You know, because it's not just the radio anymore, it's YouTube. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, where are kids consuming their music? You know, I would say that kids are consuming their music. I have an 11-year-old. I don't know about you guys, but I know what she does, and she watches YouTube. I don't even know if I could say radio, and she's like, "What are you talking about, Dad?" And like, iTunes or Spotify, Pandora. So radio, you know, we got to be careful about how we use that word going forward as a community. How you do it? I mean, may I ask? I mean, I'd love this to be an interactive experience. How many of you represent companies right now that want to build an artist-driven leg of your company that's authentic and that music supervisors believe in and that people want to license music from? Okay. Well, that's good to know. I mean, for those of you that do want to do that, and I'll speak on your behalf because I believe that we believe in the same thing, you need to go all in. And that means if you can't do it yourself, you need to be able to look at yourself in the mirror and understand that you need somebody to bring in half your age. And the first thing that I realized when I grew up mentally, and I'm 43 years old, day after tomorrow, you got to bring. It's true. Yeah, it's true. Is you got to be able to bring in young people who know more about what you don't know about what contemporary is, okay? And you need to be willing to give those people a little bit of money to go to the clubs, hang out with the artists, hang out for hours upon end, which you used to do back in the day when the internet didn't exist, and you're basically hiring an A&R guy or girl to develop that side of your company.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
As an artist, what you're not necessarily, you're not a publisher, right?
No.
So what kind of deals do you make with artists?
What I do with the songhunters.com is I offer opportunities to license your music, and I don't touch your publishing. All I do is take a commission off of the deal that I bring to the table. So,
That sounds great.
It is good because it's artist friendly. But I don't want to make you guys feel like you can't do your business either, because there's opportunity there too. I just don't want to house a catalog. When I preconceived the songhunters.com, I didn't want to house a catalog. I don't want to represent a catalog. I don't want to represent anybody. All I want you to do is have an opportunity to get a placement, and I'll take a commission from you, and you can be on the team, and we'll just grow this team together. The one thing that I believe that artists want to do is help each other. I don't think that there's, I mean, unless you had a conflict with somebody, I mean, you wouldn't help each other. Like if I got you a placement for $300 tomorrow, $300, it's $300. It's not a lot of money, but it's $300 that you didn't have. If I came to you and said, I need this genre of music, you can't produce it, you're not going to refer me to somebody?
Oh yeah, of course.
Of course you would. And that's how we've built our community. And it's through social networking. And the first intern that I ever hired to any of my companies is a social media intern. Because, and guess what? They were in their lower 20s, okay? I mean, I'm sure there's some social media nerds in here somewhere. I don't think you're one.
No.
You're probably trying your hardest. Maybe you, but you seem a little pissed off. You seem like a really hard worker, and you probably are pretty good with social media. So there's always someone to do it, but they have to be invested. And honestly, the hungry kids out of school, you have an internship going at your production company or your production music library, offer them the opportunity to grow into something that makes them some money one day, and start with the internship and someone who can spread the word that, hey, there's an opportunity here to license your music and make some money. Do you want to be involved? Well, let's create a relationship together and create an artist-friendly deal that incentivizes everybody, both sides of the coin.
Yeah. On that related note, I mean, those of you looking to get into this business, have successful businesses, I'd like to say, on the production side, you need to think of it as a completely different business with a completely different business model. Because people who have $500 for a TV show placement are going to call your production music library. When they have $50,000 for a major movie, they're not going to call you. Doesn't matter if you've got the best music in the world.
Because they think that's what you do and they don't want to insult you.
Right. I mean, we have separate brands. They happen to be owned by the same people. And largely, we have different people working at them. We've got the great young people that are out there in the clubs checking out bands every day, adding new artists, in addition to the guys writing similar music for people that don't, have a lot of money.
Now, Eric, the one thing I want to talk to you about is that, and we need to address this directly, is that the band that licenses a song for $300 is still valuable for a $50,000 placement. And that's the line that we need to ride to protect the rights of the business and of the artist, because you need to be able to say the value is still the same.
Value's the same, and also you need to get your mindset around it's not the same business model in that you're not going to own it, you're not going to get perpetual rights to this music, you're basically a sync agent. We don't take anybody's publishing, we don't earn it, that's not ours. We get a piece of the licensing like he does, and if you want, we'll administer your publishing for a standard admin fee, but if you want to do it yourself, or if you've got a publishing deal, that's not our money. It's a very different mindset than the library. We own everything, our business is collecting publishing money. It's a completely different business.
Now, not to say that there isn't the opportunity to do a co-publishing situation,
Yeah.
because there could be a personal relationship that exists between a production entity and a band or an artist, and you get to the point where it's like, hey, you know what? We have good chemistry. We should actually create something together. Then maybe you do something original together that's inspired based on a need, and you create a co-publishing situation over original music. I won't name companies, but they're huge companies that I know for a fact have done that relationship and are placing music very successfully and created original music together, and also did a co-publishing deal on past catalog as well. So the incentive was, okay, you give us half of these 5 songs, and we'll create 10 songs together and do this deal. So I'm just saying there's creative ways to incentivize artists and show them we care about you, because we genuinely do, and we want to make music together, and we want to have a long relationship together.
Good. I want to talk about that caring part in just one second, but Eric Vasquez, can you respond to that, the different levels and tiers of, you've got a lot of different kinds of artists, and you're not just doing one kind of deal with everybody. Sync Stories is one of the places they exist, but is there this is the lower tier for this is the more, we're going to sell IBM on this? I mean, how does that work where you are?
Like in terms of
Tiers.
deal structures,
Yeah.
or well, we do our best to be as flexible as possible. I think with some music libraries you have standard kind of like 50-50 deals, both on the front end and the back end, and I understand how that model works, but at the same token, at least with that model, eventually you're gonna hit a ceiling, and you can't go any further than that if you're just stuck with that model. Mm-hmm. And so, for me personally, the higher caliber artist or producer or songwriter that I'm working with, especially, since we're talking about the commercial recording space, and if you're just kind of going in with this kind of strict guideline of it's like going to be 50-50 and it's just going to be one way or the highway, I just don't feel like that works, and I feel like you do need to be a little bit more flexible with those business models, but also at the same time create a model that's going to be hassle-free for the client, whether that be a music supervisor or a TV network, when it comes to especially a one-stop approach, where you're controlling the master and the publishing, so that you can easily distribute and license that material. But at the same time, for me, it also depends on how bad I want it and how I perceive the value of what I'm listening to or what that artist is doing in their career. Are they touring? The headlining? Is the music just fucking amazing? And I will do anything to get it and represent it because I truly believe in it. Then I'll make it happen.
I'm assuming then that for, let's say, Eric and Eric, it's important for you guys to have the personal contact with the client. It's not like they're going to go to this website, they're going to find something, they're going to click and drop it in a shopping cart and take it home. It doesn't work like that.
No, I think to a certain extent it can. You know, whenever a client is searching through any kind of database, I mean, generally they're going to reach out to our coordinators to, you know, get the music search going. But, you know, for Sing Stories, you know, we have a few different subsidiaries under the umbrella, and one includes music publishing. For me, personally speaking, like, I'm out there to kick ass for our artist. I don't sit there as a pitch agent. I don't sit there and just, you know, have a few relationships and throw out a few pitches. I mean, for example, I flew out from Los Angeles to New York to be here and to share this information, but at the same token, you know, I'm at an ad agency, you know, earlier this afternoon, meeting with our clients. We're here to develop new business. I'll be at Universal Republic tomorrow. And then, I mean, before this, I was in Vegas at NAB. I was in San Francisco. I was in New York just several weeks ago, meeting with all our clients, and meeting with you, of course.
Right.
And then I go back home, and then I head to France to meet him and meet with all our sub-publishing partners and further, you know, our business development there. So for me, at least, you know, with Sing Stories and what I do, I'm very proactive, and I'm out there just kicking ass as much as I can for every single artist and composer and writer that we represent.
Which they must really appreciate. Well, in fact, it brings up the question of trust. You've got some, we've talked about some of the level of the artists you have. To get them to come on board with you, there's got to be a huge trust factor there. And so we can maybe talk about that for a second and spin that down there. It's not like they'll say, yeah, I'm going to just give you this stuff because I've had, I mean, this is like their children, these songs,
right.
The material.
Yeah, I mean, there have been several people that have asked me, you know, Eric, how do you do it? How are you getting all of these artists on board, you know, these touring artists and all this quality going? And I feel for me it's a little different because I come from that place. I started my music career at a very young age and started touring at 15 years old and got my big break at 18 and just continued touring throughout the world as a headliner. So I've experienced every aspect of it. I mean, I've slept on the floor, I've slept on the streets, I've been, you know, I've slept in closets, under the table, squatter tours, all the way to, you know, the big time and staying at nice hotels and eating fancy dinners and things like that. So I've experienced all levels of what it actually, you know, kind of takes, and is a big reason why I'm even here today, you know. And I mean, I grew up in the ghetto, you know. I'm a high school dropout. I was surrounded by gangs, violence, and drugs. And I just stayed in my apartment and just rocked out all day and night, you know. And so, you know, so I have an ability to really connect with artists in a different way than perhaps maybe a suit and tie would, or, you know, a kind of corporate entity or corporate person that might have that type of approach. And so, yeah, and so back to people actually like asking me like, how do you do it or how do you figure it out? And I think it's quite simple. It's because I speak the same language that they do, and it's not even they, it's we.
So going down the line, Patrick, how that relationship for you with your publisher, your label, and now you're moving into a new phase of your career, leaving the band, whoever you're working with now, that the level of trust there has to be extraordinary.
Between me and the people that I
Between you and the people who are doing more of the business end for you.
Oh, yeah. Listening to you talk, I'm like, I would work with this guy. Yeah, somebody who's been through all that. I'm like, yeah, I've slept under the table. Yeah, I've slept in this spot. Yeah, I've been to France. You know? I've even had a few fancy dinners. It's like, but I don't know. He's talking my language.
Yeah.
What was your question?
That was it. You got Dave.
No, but I think you both perfectly embodied exactly what I'm trying to say. Is like you have to be prepared as a company to have a real relationship with artists and be willing to do what we've all been said the music industry has been missing before this evolution, visual media, being the evolution, but developing artists like they used to do, and really developing them, not musically, but through a relationship standpoint, so that there's a mutual trust and you can actually get business done. I really respect what you're doing, hitting the roads for your artists and being outspoken about it, and not just talking about it, but actually doing it. There's very few people out there that are doing that, and you're one of the good guys in the business for sure. So listen to what this gentleman has to say. I definitely believe that it's a tough commitment to make, and you have to be able to, if you can't be this gentleman here, which many of us cannot be, I cannot be, can't offer that to my community through the Song Hunters. But if you can't do that and you want to be successful in that arena, then you need to know who that person is to be on your team, who can be trusted and do that job. And if you can't afford to fund it on that scale, then you need to figure out how to do it on the grassroots level and still make it credible. The good news is that there's plenty of talent out there, and you don't have to travel across the globe to find it. You can find it real close by. But the other thing to keep in mind is that you can reach the other side of the globe without going to it, and that's through social media. So there's definitely a bunch of different ways to attack this thing.
Eric, as an artist, what you're going to look for is, one, what placements they've had before, because it is a leap of faith. You're tying up your baby for 1 to 3 years, generally, for someone who hopefully can make you money, fame, whatever. And then it's got to be a fair deal. It's a lot more competitive than the library business in terms of supply. I'm sure every one of you in the library has an email folder of 1,300 guys wanting to write for your library. And I wish I had 1,300 really cool bands to choose from. Mm-hmm. There's just not that many out there. And we all know who they are, or a lot of them. And they're deciding between us or Marmoset or somebody else. And if you don't have a fair deal in line with what everybody else is offering, you're not going to get the good bands. And similar libraries, like we were talking, we don't want to acquire bands just to say, we've got 200 bands. And your band may be amazing. I may love listening to your band every day, but if I don't think I can actually license it and place it, it's no good for us, it's no good for you. So we're looking at here something that we hear, first of all, someone who's easy to work with. There's plenty of pain in the ass bands where we've said, you know what, good luck, it's just not worth it. And two, it's got to be something we can hear on Grey's Anatomy or in Iron Man or on a Budweiser ad. Because there's a lot of amazing bands out there that just don't write that kind of music. No knock on them at all, but there is an end user for the product. It just happens to be somebody's work of art that is being used for it.
And as a business owner, you have to be cool to that point. You have to be okay and content within yourself to not offer everything. Okay? If you guys want to create credible, artist-driven legs of your companies, then start small. Find that first good band. Be an A&R person. Think quality over quantity. You get one artist, somebody, just one person to represent, one band. That's where it starts. You cannot worry about numbers. You gotta worry about quality. Because music supervisors, directors, writers, executive producers, the guys that make the decisions that aren't in the room during your showcases, everybody wants to be the cool guy that chooses the band. Everybody, okay? They don't want to give it up to the young kid. They want to be the one, okay? So you have to figure out how to get that credibility and be cool. And Mr. Real and I were talking before the event started here, and I said it truthfully. It's like a lot of times getting that placement has nothing to do with having the greatest song in front of you and operating the business deal perfectly. It's like, were you there in the room with the guy when he actually needed to like smoke a joint? Did you have the joint in your pocket and did you roll it for him, and was it good weed? I'm serious. Like, I can't tell you how many good business deals went down because I did something that had nothing to do with business and everything to do with a personal relationship. And if you're traveling around the world, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
The magic happens next to those beers over there. That's the schmooze, booze.
Which is also why so many of these people are here, because they know that when we're not talking, before and after, they may make the contact that made it all worthwhile just to come out for a couple hours tonight.
Don't be confused. We're not advocating drug use or alcohol abuse. The point is that it's personal relationships that make this whole thing happen in a lot of ways.
We're gonna get to Q&A in a little, because I know there will be a number of them, but and we've talked about some positive things. Just starting down at Eric and coming this way, challenges that you're facing. I mean, everything sounds great from what we're hearing. What's the dark side?
The dark side on the artist side, again, is increasing competition in that, you know, everybody's got a library now, everybody's an artist sync supervisor, everybody's competing for a smaller pool of bands, and the same downward pressure that you're facing on the library side happens.
Yeah.
And clients wanting more for less money.
Yeah. Dave?
That was it right there for me. Clients wanting more for less money, like you had mentioned earlier, hitting the ceiling, you know, with your business model and having to understand and be creative with the value or perceived value of the musical content that you represent. It's a very scary thing if you get lost in that rabbit hole of, oh my God, do people perceive me as not valuable enough where I can make the money that I believe that my company is capable of making? That's a scary thing to overcome.
Patrick?
Again, I'm sort of talking from the opposite side as an artist, and I'm learning a lot tonight. Like tonight, I learned what production music is. But also, I'm an artist that I probably made 10, 15 records in my 11, 12-year career. 3 of them are from my own project. I do a lot of producing for other people. And I'm very interested in what you guys are doing, but there hasn't been that many people like you guys not like knocking on my door or my manager's door, trying to represent us in this field.
Well, largely it's because you're on Columbia.
Yeah, but we own all of our publishing. It's like we're kind of in this place where it seems like we're like too big and unapproachable, but we're not really.
Generally, Sony, Universal, Warner, I mean, they have tremendous staffs solely pushing their artists. So if there's somebody on a major,
they're not that good at it.
I know they're not that good. That's why we have a business.
But they don't want help.
No, they don't want help, and
Because they don't want to lose, they don't want to give that money up. They know that
and not only that, you can't let somebody else rep your master if you're signed to Columbia.
So all right. This leads me to another question. Is that when you guys do your deals with artists, you are repping just the master side? Is that no?
Ideally, both. Sometimes if they don't own their publishing and they're still a great band and they own their masters, we'll do a master rep. But if there's a major label involved, then there's really no place for us to play.
it's easier to just stay away.
Right.
So I just learned something else.
You know, I had a great meeting about 6 years ago with a guy named Joe Troman, who's the guitarist for Fall Out Boy, and they were on a hiatus, and he came by. He's like, I love what you do. Fall Out Boy is, on hiatus. I'd love to write for you, put out some albums. And we're like, great. We're all excited. And then, the day later he calls and goes, yeah, I have a publishing deal with Sony. I'm not allowed to write anything that's not owned by them. So that was the end of it right there.
Yeah.
Masters, he could not do anything.
I'm just thinking about this more. And now through Sony or Columbia, we've gotten a few things over the years brought in by them. Most of it hasn't been. But I'm just trying to figure out why it's a problem, because there's never been any situation where Columbia Records has said, no, you can't do this. Like I've literally done, like, placed our music and like our lead singer's little sister's like school project dance video, and like they're like, you have to get this, our manager's like, you have to get this approved. And then we've done like little indie films that are like, it's $750, but we're like, we're fine with it, and then the label's always fine with it. It's never like, so why is it scary to work with an artist on a major label?
You want to?
Well, because either one of us can potentially represent you as the artist and your song. And for us to make a commission that makes it worthwhile for our business to operate, we traditionally have not been able to make a deal that is fair to our entity to place your song. It has nothing to do with the quality of your song or you guys as a band or anything like that. It's just that the conglomerate that will not allow us to have an advantageous deal. It's not even that we want an advantageous deal. It's just
also,
that
you're not the decision maker.
Yeah, has nothing to do
The
with
label
it.
is.
So the beast, if you will, with all due respect, it's in their better interest when it comes to an opportunity that we might bring to the table to take the lion's share of the earnings. Whereas the examples that you're talking about of them solely licensing something to a festival, Clarence, or a localized educational institution has nothing to do with us representing it for another opportunity that they couldn't get.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like if I brought a Mercedes commercial and was like, well, this is the percentage that I want, they'd be like, fuck you, we're taking this. As our artists, we don't need you.
And it's not to say we don't do that. I mean, we're constantly on the phone with EMI and Warner Chappell saying, hey, we need to clear this song because an advertiser has come to us and said, we want this song. So then I get on the phone and say, what's this going to cost? So if somebody says we need to have chairlift, I'd call up and say, what do you guys want?
But in that case, you're just clearing the song.
Yeah, we're clearing the song. We'll get a little minor fee, but we're not negotiating price for your benefit. It's for the agency's benefit.
Yeah, Eric?
You're welcome.
So I'm actually spearheading this challenge right now. Sing Stories is one stop. At least when it comes to our repertoire, we control both master and publishing rights of our artist. But we've expanded our publishing capabilities, and so just recently, as of January, we published Motown Records, Berry Gordy and Kerry Gordy, their protege, Mitty Jones,
yeah.
Songwriter and producer. And so, things are working a little differently for us, as a music licensing company, because we are building it internally. It's coming from the inside out and not the outside in. So when I put together co-writes for Mitty with other commercial writers and collaborators, I get this stuff mailed down like immediately. So I'm not backtracking, it's not a track that's existing, it's not like hundreds of tracks that he's written that I now have to go back to and figure out the rights, and at least when it comes to his co-writers. So what we do is we establish the splits and the foundation before we even get Mitty in the room with anyone else. So even if it is a published writer or maybe unpublished, I will vet it, I will speak to their managers, I will speak to their publishers, and we'll sit at the table and figure out how we can work together. And so, we're going beyond establishing a relationship with his co-writers, and we're working with the labels or the third parties to get everything situated at the very beginning so that there's no surprises, or I'm going to have to come back later and try to get some kind of clearance. So we're and I can't speak about the business model in a public forum, but it's something that we figured out and something that we're working on right now. So for us, it's a little more advantageous, and because we're his publisher, and because we do already control or own a certain portion of the rights that are associated with the composition. I mean, of course, major record labels have their own synchronization departments. Perhaps, there's a lot of focus on, maybe the top tier artist on the roster. And at least when it comes to production music, we just have a different type of access. We're part of the 24/7 access of TV and film. So I think our reach is a little different than perhaps a major label. Like, for example, at some of the post-production facilities here, we have delivered a hard drive with our music, of course, and so that's a form of distribution. But again, before that hard drive is delivered, before the artist is signed, we're establishing those contracts and those agreements, like at the very, very beginning, before we even put MIDI in a room with anyone else.
Right.
And so if you have two teams working together, so if one is published with a Sony ATV or what have you, then we're going to work together on trying to really maximize the revenue for the artist or for these writers. So
all the while protecting your writer.
Well, of course, because we're managing his rights at that point. So yes, we have to protect him. We have to make sure that things are on paper. And a big trend that I see in Los Angeles that's very unfortunate is that you have so many writers and producers that are chasing the rabbit or chasing the rainbow when it comes to trying to get these commercial cuts. But what ends up happening is that they're just like burning and churning, and before you know it, they have dozens and dozens of tracks, that are sitting on a hard drive, and they're all, commercial quality music that I think would serve the licensing community very well. But they're not putting together splits. When they're in the room, you have nothing signed off, and so these producers, once they get into this mind frame of, oh shit, I want to get into licensing, then they have to go back to all those writers, and who knows where they're at, and then at that point it becomes like a clearance almost situation, and there's just like a lot of backpedaling and a lot of backtracking. So we're doing things a little different, and we're getting everything established at the very beginning. And for Sing Stories, it has positioned us in a strong position because we're able to provide our community, the TV and film community and video game community, access to the commercial space in a different way. So, so for us, it's something very unique and advantageous. And back to what Eric was saying is that some of the challenges out there are clients that are wanting free music, or they're lowballing you, and a lot of that has to do with music licensing companies that are devaluing our community, and they're giving away stuff for free, or they're doing significant kickbacks to the clients. So they're definitely not helping. But it's us in this community that are holding firm and putting our foot down and making sure that we continue to hold our value. And at least from the business side, I think one of the challenges for music libraries is, frankly, being stuck in your same model that you've had for the last how many ever years. I mean, MTV should have been YouTube, and I think they had every opportunity to be YouTube, but they didn't. And obviously, we all know what's going on with the record labels in terms of the digital era and pirating and the Pandoras and all the different the tech platforms that have taken advantage of some of the copyright loopholes. But I understand that it works, and it has worked for so many years, and it can be the basis of your success as a music library or a music company. But at the same time, I think that you really have to adapt to what is going on right now and what has been going on for several years. And now we're kind of in this uphill battle trying to figure it out, when I feel like it was in front of us the whole time. And so in my personal opinion, I think that if music libraries or production companies continue to just kind of hold tight to that same model because it's been working this entire time, guys like me are going to come around and get more creative with the models and really leverage the talent and the quality of music. And so I feel by the time you figure it out, then it's kind of too late. And I think that's what's happened in a big way in the music industry in general.
It's one of the things we're doing tonight, which is talking about adapting. And this is a very unique panel for what we normally the normal kinds of things we want to discuss, and it's rare that we get this collection of individuals.
I think it's important to say it's not too late.
No, I don't. No.
It's definitely important to say it's not too late, because as much access, the amount of music and artists and publishers that you have access to, there's millions more. There just are, and you just need to know. You just got to be able to be open enough to access those people.
So I'm going to come back. There's a couple of ideas that if we have time, I'll come back to it. But I've seen that we're already getting on the late side, and so a lot of these evenings Q&A gets very popular. And so I'm going to open it up to take some questions to start, and then if we have a minute, I'm going to come back at the end with a couple of other things. So if we can open up the floor to some questions for any of our panelists, we'd be happy to respond. Yeah.
Hey everybody. So just from from the artist side, so you're talking a lot from the library side. I'm an independent artist, and I think there's probably some of this here as well. And I'm just wondering, what your advice is from where to start. There's so many different models and so many different libraries. I'm a member of 3 libraries, and I was exclusive with one, and I dropped that after not seeing as much pickup as I had previously because they got too many artists. So there's so many different models and so many different libraries. And what would you guys suggest as an indie artist, somebody who's not in like the major or even the indie label scale, as a composer or independent artist?
And you're local and you're playing here, or?
Yeah, so I'm a singer-songwriter and I'm a composer. So all my singer-songwriter stuff I was playing here, and then now I compose for film and TV. So a lot of the compositions I was selling through places like MusicBed, if you guys have heard of that, and other libraries as well. And then working with a company that comes to me with library polls or custom song requests that I write for their clients, in kind of like a competition type deal.
And you'd like that to go better?
Well, I think there's just so many options, and I think a lot of artists are saying, should I go with this library that has a sliding scale of payments? There's a library that you get paid based on the amount of downloads you get. There's a library that has a shitty website, which is a lot of libraries, to be honest. But they have 20,000 songs, and they might want exclusivity to give you a better cut, but you have no idea if they're going to help you out. And so I just think there's a wide variety of options, and it's really difficult for the artist to decide which route to go.
Eric K., you want to start?
Sure. I think the first thing you need to do is have 2 different hats. And one hat is your artist hat, and I'm a recording artist, and these are my albums, and you want that to go to somebody who deals with artists exclusively. You don't want to take your album and put it in a production library, because you're going to be unhappy. You're not going to be able to sell it on your own necessarily. There's going to be issues. So if you're putting out, albums commercially available on iTunes, that should be separate from a production library. I'm not going to get into the exclusive, non-exclusive discussion. That could last for hours. I can say that us, and I would say the vast majority of owners here are exclusive libraries. Personally, I think that works best for everyone. There are other people who have different models, they think it different. That's a real tough question, where best to put your music. Who really wants you, and who really seems to be doing good stuff with their music, I would say.
Also stay away from crowded spaces. You know, it's like, I hate to make professional sports comparison, but I mean, if you're desiring to be the starting quarterback of an NFL franchise, don't join the franchise that has two guys playing. It's not going to happen. So, you know, try to find somebody who needs your style of music.
And also, you might want to look at foreign catalogs. There's a lot of foreign libraries that do not have a lot of American composers, and they need that. You know, there's very few European guys that can pull off a convincing American indie rock band or indie folk. They don't have the singers. It doesn't sound right. It's not produced the same. So that might be a space where you could get in and have some success.
To make a small plug for exclusive versus non-exclusive, if you're building your own personal catalog and you're going non-exclusive, there's a lot of places down the road, if you're trying to sell your catalog, that won't touch it for that reason. Now that you've got all this technology in the world that can, Shazam-based technology too, and these other SoundMouse, where they can spot your cue and return that information to you and your publisher. If you're non-exclusive, you know, 5 publishers saying, yeah, that was my placement. And that's just the tip of the iceberg of what's wrong with that. It makes it very, very difficult to sell down the line. You can ask any of the publishers in the room who've been doing this for a while. Non-exclusive can be very tough later.
The other most important thing about a knock against non-exclusive libraries, if somebody steals your music and uses it, you have no recourse. You have no idea who did it. Maybe it's a legitimate license, maybe it's not. If you have one person representing your catalog and they didn't do it, you've got a nice infringement on your hands.
Mel?
Hello. You mentioned something about there being a need for lyric-driven songs, which is interesting because in my head too, I thought, oh, well, you don't want to distract from what's going on in the picture. Can you talk more about that, what kind of need there is, and if you feel like, is there a certain thing people ask for? Do people want comedic songs?
I mean, I'll just have an immediate response. I mean, from my perspective, I work in on-air promotions for MTV as a consultant. I've been there for over a decade. Licensed billions of dollars of music across the board for Fox, ABC, Viacom, all networks. And no one ever says, I want a song with words. They just want the song that perfectly embodies whatever their piece is. So are you asking what I should write about? Is that what you're asking? Like what lyrics people are asking for? Because what it comes down to is basic human situations. You know, the one thing that I have encountered as a music supervisor so many times that I could scream out of frustration is that you talented singer-songwriters create beautiful melodies, vocal melodies, and you talk about the weirdest shit. I'm fucking serious. Like, come on, like I understand like it's your true self, but if you really want to get your stuff placed, you have to be a little bit sensitive to what people understand. And it's a universal message as opposed to your deep, dark, twisted, fucked up message. You know, that maybe, you know, and this is what's frustrating is maybe like the first verse and like half the chorus gets there and then all of a sudden you're like, oh shit, you had to go there. So like, do that for sure, for yourself, but keep in mind that beautiful path that you wrote yourself on leading up to that chorus, like instead of doing it for yourself, think about somebody else and maybe finish the story in a way that's palatable on a universal platform as opposed to an individual platform. And don't worry about writing about a thing that is needed, just think universally, like how could this relate to not just me, but a lot of people.
Also in response to whether the lyrics are going to get in the way, what we're talking about is placing songs with lyrics, and so they will determine later on
if they need that or want that.
Yeah. So those lyrics will be based on if there's dialogue going on in the scene, they'll mix it appropriately. They may ask you for stems so that they've got the version with the vocal that's happening earlier in the scene, and then later on they've got the music only, which is the great lesson about always have stems on your websites for your clients at the ready, because as many music supervisors and people looking will tell you, if you don't have the stems and they need it now, they just move on to the next person on the list.
There's a need for it.
Absolutely, there's a need for it. Yes, definitely. Yeah.
Sorry, just real quickly. Yes, there is a need for it, and requests will come in that will specifically say we want a song, with lyrics, and oftentimes, if it's an ad agency or a particular client, they'll also say things like, we want references in the lyrics to this or this and that. So I think in a nutshell, that it doesn't. If they want an instrumental, you'll give them an instrumental. But there's a high need for music with vocals.
Absolutely. And on the advertising side, there's always the same themes that come up every year. Feel good, inspiration. It's a brand new day. I'm gonna, kick ass in the world. But more often than lyrics, what seems to sell well for advertising is tracks with vocables. Vocals, but not words. Oohs and ahs that aren't background vocals, but
Human elements.
human elements
Yeah.
without actual words, because you can slick that in anywhere.
Yeah.
You should always have 3 mixes of all of your stuff. Full mix, instrumental, vocals only, background vocal mix, because they'll often cut between them on one usage.
Drum solo.
Drum solo.
Thank you, gentlemen, for a great panel, by the way. Great stuff up there tonight.
Thanks.
I had a question going back to one of the challenges that a few of you mentioned is keeping sync values up. What do you have in your toolbox when you get that client coming back to you and say, well, we only have $300 for this, and you obviously wanted to get 5,000. What besides maybe throwing out, well, they have 20,000 Instagram followers, what besides that can you counter with recording artists to get that value back up? Sure.
Well, operating on both sides of the desk and representing throughout my career several different conglomerates and protecting their budgets, as well as operating businesses where I'm trying to get their money, with all due respect. What I have done, and what you all should know, is that there are good people like me on the desk side of the conglomerates that actually say, all right, so here's the deal. The song you want, these are the terms, okay? You say you only have X amount of dollars. If you want that song, you need to pay that money, okay? We can get you another song. We can. We got plenty of options. But this is what they are going to cost, and they're not exactly on the nose of what you're asking for. So you get what you pay for. And that's the reality. And I don't know how many guys have the balls to actually say that, or girls have the balls to actually say that, but I guarantee I'm not the only one. Because it really comes down to, you get what you're paid for. And you know what it takes. You know how hard it is to get the value, to build the value of a song or an artist. So I'm sure that you can really speak on this in the sense of protecting the value of the music. It's like, no, you cannot have that particular song for that money. No, you can't.
And Yoav, I'm sure you also know the value, the power of the word no. Obviously, we've all been there when we've said it, and it's really worked to our advantage. It can be a great equalizer.
Yes.
But I was having this conversation with Eric Vasquez the other day that we were talking about the race to the bottom that we've seen in a lot of the larger catalogs where they're giving everything away. And Eric was talking about the fact that he's seen a bit of whiplash where clients are beginning to say, you know what, I gotta have something better for this particular job, and maybe there's a couple behind it where I'm gonna need something good and I'm ready to pay for it. because I don't want to go that route. I've been there and everybody else is there. So what do you have for me that I can buy?
Exactly.
Yeah, well, back to that conversation, again, it kind of goes back to the stigma of, I mean, there's the word music library, but when you start giving stuff away for free, then that's just going to stick with you. And, more often than not, the client is going to get exhausted. And yeah, it might be free or maybe a couple $100, but, at the end of the day, they need to make their client happy as well. I mean, it might be coming from their client if it's a director or executive producer in terms of budget, but I mean, honestly, like even if it's a brand and you're putting some shit music in it or stock music or royalty free, yeah, you get what you pay for. And you do have to have the courage to say no. And I think what's happened is that, for many people who are just starting in this business, whether they're a licensing company or a composer, a writer that is, trying to get their start in this business, then, sometimes they're more prone to, making those kinds of deals happen. But again, it just kind of devalues like everyone else. And once the client starts thinking or getting into this mind frame that music should be free, then it's no good for any of us. So we're a strong, we won't like deal with that. If they want a gratis license or something for a couple $100, like there's no way I'm gonna do that to one of my artists, because they deserve much more than that.
Right. Yeah.
Just to add to that point, speaking in terms of valuing and devaluing music, I mean, as a representative of artists, do you believe that creating a tier system, similar to what you talked about earlier, but I'll use it slightly differently, yeah, you might not be able to afford this artist here, and I'm going to protect the rights of that artist because they've achieved certain deals over time where, well, this is the market for their music. But these guys, they're just as good. They've never had a placement before. They're just making their name, and we can get you under this price range right now because this would be a huge opportunity for them. But I can't tell you this is going to be the price of their music in 4 months.
Good. There was a question here?
Hey guys, my name is Omari Clark. Y'all can follow me on Instagram at Omari Clark. And I'm a musical composer. I play like 4 instruments. And I wanted to see like, what's the best way to like break in to like the sync and like get placements as like a producer? Is there like a specific website that like I could go to like submit stuff?
Well, coming here was a good thing to do.
I have the same question.
I thought you said you learned something. I mean, we all know that there's just there's so many answers to that question. Eric, what do you think, man?
I think there's a lot of people in this room that could help you if you're ready. And the important thing is, if you're ready, is your music the best it can be, or are you still developing your chops?
It's the best.
Thank you. You realize you're competing against people that have won Grammys and Oscars, and nowadays everybody can make a record and put it on iTunes tomorrow, which is fantastic because it's accessible to everybody, But in your respect, you're competing against those same people, which is great. But if you're not up to snuff and your music isn't, sound just like it could be on the radio tomorrow or as good as everything else out there, and you have to be honest with yourself. Don't submit, because a lot of times you only get one choice. We get bombarded by new composers every day, and we'll give them 5 or 10 minutes to listen. And if we don't hear anything in that first 5 minutes, it's into the pile with the other 90% that just aren't quite ready yet or never will be. So have your stuff as good as it can be, and then, meet everybody in this room.
There's no shortage of artist-driven companies out there that have a track record of success, and by no means am I advocating for these companies, but there are companies like Pump Audio, Jingle Punks, Music Playground, The Song Hunters, Taxi, Broad Jam. The list goes on. And no one is better than the other, or there's opinions out there that say that they are, but I think what Eric is saying makes the most sense. It's all about the quality of your music, and I will say it's all about the personal relationships that you make that are chemical with you, that make the most sense for you and your music. And it may not be any of those companies that I just said. It might be a guy who starts his company tomorrow that you meet at a club or online.
I just want to add to that. Don't do the pay-to-play thing. That's just coming from me. I don't think that's a good route. And you mentioned maybe Taxi. I'm not sure if they're still doing that, but I'm seeing more companies that are developing these pay-to-play models where you submit your music and you have to pay $5 or whatever it is, some kind of monthly subscription, and I think it's total bullshit, my personal opinion. And I get approached by these companies every so often, and they try to use my opportunities or our relationships to turn around and rip off the artist by making them pay money to submit their music with like no guarantee. They just kind of screen it and then they push it off to me. And then that company tells Sync Stories that we're going to get exposure for it. And I think that is like completely lame. And at least when it comes to Los Angeles and things that are going on in Hollywood that have been going on for so many years, those music venues have made it nearly impossible for any artist to really leverage their career because, again, they're paying to play and they got to go and sell tickets, and and then when they sell those tickets, they're going to sell them to their family members, they're going to sell them to their friends, but that's not your audience. You're trying to reach an audience and build your audience, and it's really crappy that that's happening in the live performance environment, and I think it's just really terrible that it's entering our community. You shouldn't have to do that. And in terms of linking up with people, like Eric said, this is kind of the best way to do it. I think these conferences are super valuable, and you're going to meet a lot of people and network with a lot of people, but then comes delivery. And if your product or your sound is ready to go, then we will hear that. And back to what the gentleman was saying about how to get started. I mean, as a composer, as a writer, like just keep writing, keep developing your craft. When I first started writing music for TV and film, I was doing some of the work for hires, where I was transferring my master and publishing ownership for fees, and it worked for me in the beginning. And I was operating, under exclusive models. I've never done non-exclusive, and so that was kind of like the beginning for me, with working with music licensing companies, doing work for hires, getting some money in the pocket, putting bread on the table, and then just kind of building from there. Do I do any work for hires now? Like, no, it's years later, and I've kind of developed over time. But back to getting in and having your music represented for any amount of years or exclusivity. In my mind, when I was younger, writing and producing for TV and film, I always knew that the next day, the next week, I was going to write even a better track than I did the previous week. So yes, I had music in licensing companies, I had them in exclusive libraries, I was doing work for hires, but again, it was all good with me because I knew that in the coming months as a writer, that my music was just going to keep getting better and better and better. So I had, zero problem with, putting that music in with licensing companies. But I mean, I know that's kind of a derailment from the question, but I just kind of want to throw that out there, especially if you're, starting to get in this business. And we're all here, so get our information, and then we'll check it out. And if we believe in it and we feel like it has a good shot, then we'll communicate with you. And if not, then we'll give you good feedback, to kind of help your next step.
It's always about writing the next song. It's always about, even if you have a hit, if you had a hit musical or whatever, be doing the next one, because somebody's going to come up and want the next one. So it's a good idea to have it ready to go.
The other trend I'm seeing more and more, those of you wanting to get placements in sync, is library owners are looking for complete albums they can release now as a production library. If you put together 10 or 12 songs in one theme with 30-second cut downs, you're more likely to get somebody to say, okay, we'll take this album. You'll get either a fee or a big percentage of the licensing, and bam, you're out there. And it's much harder to do with one song here and one song there. And the other thing I would tell everybody is don't email MP3s. Streaming with Dropbox, even that streaming links, a SoundCloud link, somewhere where somebody can just click and audition. We don't want our mails clogged up with hundreds of megabytes of MP3s.
What's the blame the opposite? Don't fucking send CDs.
Yeah, Joe.
How you doing?
What kinds of questions should composers ask potential partners so that they don't get taken advantage of? For example, I'm thinking of thresholds that need to be crossed before sync sharing begins, or direct license payouts that never materialize. What are the kinds of traps that people should be aware of?
Pitfalls.
To be pitfalls. Look at the company's track record. Look at how many pieces of music they represent.
The term, possibly.
The terms, yeah, exactly.
Expectations, I think, is a big one. I think that should be asked, and I think that it's the music licensing company that should be sharing that information up front anyway.
Is there specific, would you go, Joe? Specific cautionary, is there a cautionary tale here?
Well, the sync threshold, for example, is one. So there are companies that will say, we'll give you a percentage of the sync license, but in order to actually get your share, the sync license has to be a particular value. And they will sometimes do all of their licenses just under that particular value, so they keep 100% of the license. So there are lots of little hidden things like that in deals that can really trip people up if they don't know what to ask for. Or companies that will do direct licensing deals and not pass on the writer share to the writer. So that's what I'm wondering if you guys have had other experiences that we can help make sure other people don't have.
Yeah, from my perspective, that's about trust, which is obviously huge with your publisher, with your representative. In the beginning, it's tough to know who that person's going to be.
Right. I mean, at least for me, I'm very informative about our agreements. Even if I'm not working with an artist manager and I'm just dealing with the artist alone, I will inform them of everything, because I want to make sure that they understand what they're signing and that they understand the terms, that they understand the expectations. But I mean, I think it's good for any artist or writer to, kind of ask as many questions as possible. And I'm not sure if all companies are really kind of informing their writers and artists about what most of those terms mean, or those provisions in a contract. So, I mean, for us, it works just a little bit differently because we try to, fill in all the holes if they have any questions. But overall, I mean, we present the contract and we go line by line and let them know exactly what everything means and how it affects them, whether that's revenue share or terms and what have you. So that's.
But again, like Patrick said, you're unusual. I mean, I think there's a lot of unusual players up here. When there's some folks out there who are less than savory as far as business practices go.
To answer Joe, I would also recommend, if you're not aware of it, go to musiclibraryreport.com. it's sort of the consumer reports for this business, and the bad players are outed there.
So I think I got the 2-question heads up. Morgan, is that right? Yeah. Okay, someone here.
How you doing? I'm Brad Heckler. A little about me, I produce electronic music as well as co-produce and ghost produce it, and also DJ my own music as well as other people's that styles are similar to me. From where you guys hear, I'm hearing about bands and bands. How's the demand for electronic music producers?
Really big. I represent many electronic dance music DJs and producers, so it's really big. I mean, those requests come in a lot. I mean, you know, you have a lot of big festivals going on, and you know, I think the sync community really follows the commercial side. You know, I guess if you want to call it radio or Spotify, what have you, but I mean, that's really where a lot of it comes from. You know, you're gonna get a soup that's gonna be like, oh, I want like a Skrillex, or I want a Nero, or you know, I mean, that's really a lot where a lot of it comes from. But yeah, I mean, that's a huge demand.
I've been feeling that like everybody wants a genre, but then EDM's tied into it.
Right. All the EDM, yeah.
Yeah, it's like a little EDM.
Yeah.
It's always that.
A little dub jazz.
EDM.
Yeah, but it's huge, man. I mean, obviously, it's a phenomenon in you know, modern day culture, and you know, rock is kind of, you know, taken somewhat of a step back in a way. I mean, obviously, indie rock is really huge, but yeah, I mean, that's every day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ron.
Great panel, everyone. I have a question regarding known versus unknown artists. To what extent are clients looking to license songs from known artists as opposed to unknown artists? And if you have, for example, a really great song by a completely unknown artist with no touring schedule, no social media, no website, no one has ever possibly heard of this artist or band, maybe it's not even a real artist or band, does that matter? And to what extent are clients just looking for a great song, and to what extent does it have to be a verifiable artist that's touring and so on?
It 100% has to do with who the client is and what the product is and what they want. Because every single panelist up here right now knows, and maybe hopefully most of you in the room, I'm not the first person telling you, that agencies, producers, product lines, movies, TV shows will pay for an artist's name if they want that name associated with their particular product or production. And they will sacrifice the product to get it at times, even if it costs them more money to get a better song. So keep that in mind. It has nothing to do necessarily with the quality of the song a lot of time. A lot of time it's like, you know what? John Legend is the guy that I just knew was supposed to sing the song on my soundtrack, and it's going to be the title song, and I won't settle for anybody else, and I'm going to pay the money to get it, whether there's 20 better songs. And I happen to like John Legend. I'm just using his name right now. It's just hypothetically. But the point is, to your point, you might have the best song ever, and it doesn't matter necessarily. It doesn't change the value of your song either, because John Williams will always get paid to do a score, even if it's somebody else doing the score under his name, you know, and Pearl Jam will always get that placement if the director is just waiting for that opportunity in his career to license the Pearl Jam song versus the song from the local garage band that's just so fucking awesome, but they won't give it a nod because even though it's perfect for the scene, it's not Pearl Jam.
Well, thank you. Can you get premium rates for the song from the unknown artist as well?
You can, but it's not as common.
Got it. Thank you.
Right. We're good. I'm getting the wrap up circle. When Patrick said earlier that when he looked to his left and his right, frankly, and said, "Hey, I'm looking for somebody like you," it's because these are some unusual folks. We get a little bit jaded sometimes because we come to production music symposiums and conferences, and we are busy with what we're doing and the people that we are friends with and may compete with. But I'm here to tell you that it was not easy to put this panel together. We had an entirely different panel, and Henry did this with me, lined up, and we couldn't get a lot of the folks, or they couldn't fly in, or maybe they weren't quite right. And starting with Eric, when I met Eric, I realized, oh, wait a minute, these are the kind of people we need here. So it's unusual. Thank you for being here. I'm thrilled to have met all of you tonight, and thanks for these. Come take advantage. They're willing to chat, I believe.